America has officially lost its mind. NFL player Aaron Rodgers had a little drama when he tested positive for the virus, and it also turns out he doesn't know how to Google words.
Are you vaccinated, and what's your stance on vaccinations?
Yeah, I've been immunized.
Except you're not, Aaron. He also claimed he's being chased by a woke mob. Aaron, what would a woke mob look like? Do you know what woke means? Luckily, he shows his good judgment by getting medical advice from this guy. Because really, what are doctors for? As if that's not bad enough, this journalist believes this shot contains a tracking device linked to the devil. And now Big Bird is encouraging everyone to get the shot, because clearly adults in this country will listen to Big Bird. The rest of the world is looking at us right now and are like, these people got their independence? Geeks, this is the week of absurd news, so stick around because we have stories that just don't make any sense. Before we start though, hit that subscribe button below and like this video. We all know Belarus's dictator, Alexander Lukashenko, is a criminal thug, but I guess even we didn't realize how much. Europe and the United States have been imposing sanctions to get at Lukashenko's power after he rigged an election last year and has been repressing people since. So Lukashenko decided he would play dirty and would retaliate by sending thousands of migrants to the borders of Poland and Lithuania. And this was a calculated and deliberate move, which he warned he could do earlier this year. So he literally sought out and brought in people, mostly from the Middle East, and once they got to Belarus, he pushed them towards the borders. So now you have 3,000 to 4,000 of them stuck at the border with Poland, and apparently more than 10,000 others are on their way. The migrants there say that Belarusian authorities have seized their phones, and many have no food or water. And since the temperatures at the border are now below zero, several of them have died waiting there. These are human beings. They're not pawns in a chess game. Now, Lukashenko pretends he has no clue, and while he's a good criminal, he's not that good an actor. In fact, the EU analyzed air traffic to show that there have been nearly double the amount of flights than usual from the Middle East over the last couple weeks. Lukashenko is pulling a trick out of the Turkish president's playbook, who has also sent migrants to Greece and to Europe when he gets pissed with them. So these thugs are using humans as a weapon. Now, everyone has expressed outrage at the situation, and the EU says they're going to beef up the borders and impose sanctions on Lukashenko, and they're hoping his buddy Russian President Putin will help. You're going to be waiting a long time for that, Europe, since Putin likely already knew of this plan and approved it. If the situation doesn't calm down soon, it could get super ugly. You have people on the border who are literally dying, and you have troops lined up on both sides. It's up to Lukashenko to take care of or send back the people he literally flew in. And Europe in particular is going to have to get tough with its sanctions to kick Lukashenko off his throne. The Iraqi prime minister this week escaped an assassination attempt after 3 drones targeted his residence in Baghdad. 2 of them were shot down and 1 hit his house but didn't succeed at killing him. And the US says Iraqi militias backed by Iran were behind this. So now everyone came out quickly to condemn this attack. People like President Biden, European and Iraqi officials, and the UN. Even the Iranian government condemned it. We condemn the attack on our friend, the Iraqi prime minister. Sorry, did you say we were behind this attack? Oh, that's awkward. Okay, let's redo the tape. We condemn the attack perpetrated by the United States on the Iraqi prime minister. The background story to how this all happened is that the Iranian militias that likely pursued this attack are pissed that they keep losing elections. Since this prime minister took office, they've been attacking the green zone in Baghdad, which is where you have government buildings and an international presence. And they've threatened or killed others who have tried to work against them. But after pro-Iran candidates only won a few seats in recent parliamentary elections, these militants decided to act like mean girls, and so they protested. They even used the term "stop the steal." And then they became violent and started attacking Iraqi security forces. Then they sent their remote-controlled toys to try and assassinate the prime minister. And the irony of it is that their behavior will likely only help the prime minister win another term, since they've proven themselves to be crazy terrorists. If that's not a lesson in how not to seek revenge, I don't know what is. Several Iraqi politicians struggle to fight against Iran's influence in the country, and it's dangerous work, but they're lucky that for now, they seem to have the majority of Iraqis behind them. The best way for them to prevent Iran from exerting more influence in the country is by ensuring they have the Iraqi people behind them. And the best way to do that is to properly take care of and protect Iraq citizens by pursuing reforms to ensure they have jobs, basic services, and a safe and promising future. 20 years after the war on terror began, some ugly skeletons are coming out that the US government is reckoning with. For the first time in public, an Al-Qaeda recruit named Majid Khan described the torture he went through in CIA prisons. The examples of torture are pretty horrific, and so I've linked to some articles in the show's description. 7 senior US officers who were serving on a military jury listening to this guy's testimony were so horrified they signed a letter calling for him to be granted clemency, which means basically extending some kind of mercy and often reducing the penalties for the crime. They said that the physical and psychological abuse he went through was closer to torture performed by the most abusive regimes in modern history, and that this torture was a stain on the moral fiber of America and should be a source of shame for the US government. Not only is torturing detainees entirely against American values and what we preach to those abroad, but it's also dumb and counterproductive. In fact, it's been proven in numerous cases, including this one, that those who are tortured often fabricate stories in order to get the torture to stop. So basically, in addition to being inhumane and undemocratic, torture is useless for our intelligence or national security. If you're interested in this, I highly recommend listening to this recent episode of the podcast This American Life, where they interview Mohamedou Salahi, who was in prison for 14 years and released because there just wasn't enough evidence to convict him. He was also tortured, and he also made up stories to get it to stop. Former Secretary of Defense General Mattis famously said that he could get more information from a detainee by offering a pack of cigarettes and a couple of beers rather than torturing him. And I asked you all if you thought torture undermines our foreign policy and national security, and 60% of you said yes. Actually, that surprised me. I thought it would be more. One of the first things President Obama did when he got to office is get rid of what are called enhanced interrogation techniques, which are forms of torture. And so this is not really something we see anymore. And I'm not trying to make it look like these guys are innocent, because frankly, they're usually not. But it's good to have this history out in the public because we can learn from it, ensure we don't make these mistakes again, and create a better and more efficient system to go after terrorists in a way that supports our national security. This story is so ridiculous, I don't even know where to start. Nicaragua's leader, Daniel Ortega, claims he won his 4th consecutive term as president. But the problem is that in the run-up to the election, he had the police imprison all of his major political rivals and a bunch of other presidential candidates. I mean, the guy's like, I won! Like, dude, no you didn't. You only won because you were basically the only person on the ballot. I'm telling you, there is no shortage of absurd news this week. First of all, this guy's basically Nicaragua's dinosaur. So maybe it's time for some new blood. He originally came to power in 1979 and won his first election in 1984. He was out of office for a while during the 90s, but then came back in 2007. And since then, he's done everything he can to undermine democratic institutions in order to stay in power. He's become especially ruthless over the last few years, though. When protests took place in 2018, his regime responded with violence, killing more than 300 people. He took down the free press, he went after civil society groups, and got rid of opposition political parties. He has jailed, harassed, and intimidated political opponents, journalists, and activists. So this summer, the Democratic opposition united themselves to try and unseat this guy, but almost immediately the 7 leading opposition candidates were detained or disappeared. Now, Russia, Cuba, and Venezuela have congratulated Ortega. That's a winning endorsement. And the US, UK, and EU have slammed this election. Ortega and his family are already sanctioned, but Biden just signed a bill that would add more sanctions and other measures to target those in the country responsible for repression and corruption. I think that's good, but the thing I'm more interested in is that the Organization of American States might actually suspend Nicaragua's membership over this, which could send an even louder message. Without a strong collective response, Ortega will feel like he can get away with anything, and he'll likely get even more repressive. And because of this, I'd also expect to see an increase in migrants from Nicaragua after a record number have tried to cross the US border this year. All in all, it's going to be a rough road until we can find a way to undermine this guy. And until then, Ortega will be on my shit list. A female Chinese journalist named Zhang Zhan tried to report on the virus in Wuhan when the pandemic began, but she was arrested in May 2020 by the Chinese regime for her efforts. She was given a 4-year jail term and since then has gone on a few hunger strikes, but now reports say she is dangerously close to death. So the US this week publicly called on China to release her. The backstory is that she went to Wuhan at the very beginning of the pandemic, and she started writing and covering what she saw in the city and in hospitals, in live streams and written pieces, which were all shared widely on social media. Chinese authorities threatened her, but she still continued with her work. And then in May of last year, the regime snatched her. What's heartbreaking about this, in addition to the fact that this woman knowingly put her life at risk to share the truth with the world, is that you have a blatant effort by the Chinese regime that is so afraid of its own shadow that it'll engage in the most criminal cover-up this century has seen if it means it can hang on to power. I hope Zhang Zhan doesn't pay for this with her life, but it's because of brave journalists like her that we have valuable information at all, and for that reason, she's totally crushing it. If you want to join the masses calling for her release, please consider posting on social media with the hashtag #FreeZhangZhan. Thanks, Geeks! Before we go, a quick shout out to the International Handball Federation for changing the dress code for women to include shorts. We talked about this a few months ago when the Norwegian team fought to get the sexist dress code changed, showing that activism can work, and also that I can now audition for these tournaments. Before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button below and like this video. And if you have any questions, feedback, or stories you want me to talk about, please leave a comment or reach out to me directly on the socials. Stay fabulous, Geeks.